Okay. Can you see the screen again? Because I tried to reshare it.
Yes.
Okay, so in our last class, this is kind of like where we were, where we just created different routes. So in this class, I just created this file for template. Let's look at templates in Flask. Now, this is our basic Flask app, and then save it and let's run it to see if it's working well. So we run it by, because of the way we structured our file, we can say Python and then the file name template dot py and run it. So we can see that it's running. Let's check it. What it says. Okay, hold on. I'm having a conflict. So this is the application showing. Okay. So just like we put it now, once you come to the landing page, what you see is this is our home page, and that's what is showing on the browser. If we right click on it and inspect, we would see the way it's being displayed. This is our home page, right? Now let's go a step further. Now in Flask, what we are doing now, we are just returning like a string. This is our home page, okay? But in Flask, we can do more than this. We can actually return a an HTML document, and that HTML document, those are the ones we now call like the templates. So for us to do that, in our directory here, we need to create a folder called templates. Okay, we need to create a folder called templates. So I'll create a new folder and call it templates. Now what tends to happen when you use this template, Flask will come in here. It knows, it expects that there's a folder called templates. So it comes into the folder to look for the template in that folder primarily. And that's one of the reasons why when we instantiate the app in line 3, we passed in this um, name argument here. This name is telling it, it uses it to know the location of your main app, your main file, and how things are structured. So from this location, it can be able to check that on the same folder. Let me look for a folder called templates. In the same folder, so it will look for templates. Now in templates, you will then keep your HTML template. That's what we're talking about. So let us create a template first of all. Under template, let me create one I'll call um, base.html. So this is a HTML temp file now. It's not just a Python file. Okay, so now this is the basic structure, at least for a HTML file. I believe most of us would know that HTML has different parts. You have the main HTML tags, and then you have the head and the body sections. So HTML, the head section, and the body section. So now, instead of us just passing, this HTML is called base.html. Now, instead of us to just pass this line, we can copy this line and put it in the HTML, for instance, in the body, and say, okay, this is our home page in a HTML file, right? And then here we can import something else from Flask, which is called render template. Okay, so we can import render template from Flask. It's another um, Flask component that can be imported. This render template now is what we are going to use to render or show our HTML template. So here, instead of returning just a string, we can then return render template and pass it the name of the template, which is base.html. Okay, so with rendering this template base.html, we can direct it now to render that template for us. Okay, instead of us just passing a string now, we can pass the HTML file that we created and be able to show it when this route is called upon. So if I save it and then we go back to the page, refresh it, it's still showing. Okay, it's not showing anything, but it has gone to the base file. But the reason why it's not showing anything is when I created the file, I've not saved it. So I need to save this file, right? So that whatever we put in it is carried. And then go back and refresh. So it's now showing this is our home page. Okay, let me add this now, say from the HTML file. So save it, come back here, refresh. So you see from the HTML file. So what's now happening, which you can see obviously, is with render templates, we are now able to display our HTML file, which is stored in a folder called templates. If you store it in any other place, or maybe you didn't spell these templates correctly, it will not pick it up. So Flask already expects that it will be saved in a folder called templates, right? So you have to get this right when you're using Flask to make sure everything displays properly. So now, instead of us doing it the way we did in the last class, which is this, where we are just having roots and just passing strings, returning strings when those roots are called. Now you can now begin to see the next steps that instead of returning a string, we can return a HTML document. Now, knowing that you can return a HTML document, you can go ahead and design this HTML document properly, the way you want it to look with the beautifications and everything. And then using your Flask, you can then root and pick up the HTML file. Okay, so this is what we'll now talk about template. This is a HTML template that our application can deliver to our user. I hope it's clear. Okay, so this is template. Now, in addition to, thank you. In addition to templates, we can have what we call template variables. We can pass variables into these templates using Flask and also make use of them in the templates. So what I'm talking about is this. So if, for instance, here I have a variable, remember that variables could contain different things. I can have a variable called name and say the name is John. So this John now could be maybe someone's name. We can also pass this to that template and as a template variable using Flask. So here I can just say that I can call it whatever I want to call it, which is now the variable name we're passing. I can say user is equal to name. Okay, so now what is happening here? This is the name, and then in my HTML document, I'm going to see it as user. So I said user is equal to name. You can pretty much say anything, but I'm just using user. So you see, it doesn't have to be exactly the same name as this name. So I called it user. Now, this way, render templates is going to pass user into this template document. Now, if I go back to the template document, I can access it using what we call Ginger. So there's an engine that Flask works with, which is the Ginger, and Ginger helps us to display variables. So here now, I can say this is our home page. Let me just remove all of this, not necessary. So when I have this, I can then say, okay, maybe a H2 now. I'll say, welcome. Now to use Ginger templates, you use double curly brackets like this, and I can then say user. So I have this double curly bracket, which is the Ginger template used to pass that variable we pass to this, and then I'll now save this HTML file now that we are referencing the user here, and then we'll then go back and refresh our page. Um, welcome user. Why are we not seeing user? So let me save this again because I notice I've not saved it. Then go back and refresh the page. So you can see John. The first time was not showing because I had not saved it even after making the update. But now what you now see is that in Flask we are passing a Python variable into the HTML template, and we are able to access it in the template and make use of it. Okay, so we can see welcome John. So we've successfully passed this variable to our template, and then inside of the template we are able to use Ginger templating to pick up the variable. Okay, so you can pass the variables. Of course, when you're working in Python here in your app, what it then means is you could have possibly had a kind of login mechanism, and somebody has logged in and the person's name is John, and then you can pass it to the HTML page and you see his name in the page. Maybe you sign in. After signing in, then he knows that your name is John. And the page can tell you, welcome. Whoever it is that signs in, your name will be what you have here as user. The other thing we can do is, instead of calling it user here, we could still call it like this, name, which is what most people tend to do at times. So you tend to make sure that they are just the same name so that you avoid making it look as if you're having different names. So what I will do, let me call it user. Instead, since I have user in the template, I'll just call this user and then modify this one. Instead of calling it name, I'll call it user. So it's just like we're using the same, variable name. But I deliberately use different name first time so that we could see that it doesn't have to be exactly the same. Okay, but it's good to just say like user equal to user, whatever the name is here. Okay, that makes sense. Now, in addition to passing just a variable user, we can still pass a list. We can say cities. We can have a Python list. I will say ph. No, it has to be a string. Ph Lome. Which other city now? Cape Town. So this is just like a list of cities. I can also pass it into my template the same way. Okay, so it's passing another one now, city. Basically, you can pass Python objects. Like now, this is a list. I can also pass a dictionary. Okay, I can pass in a tuple from here into the HTML this way. So if I come into my HTML page, I can say add another, maybe a paragraph now and say using that ginger, we'll still access it. Say user has visited the cities in the list. When I do this, I'm putting cities. Okay. So now I need to save it. Save this, and I also save this one. Good. Now here, I just added a line, still using this person's name. Now, whoever that name is, in our case now is John. So we expect to see John has visited the cities in the list, cities. So here now, it will be able to display this list for us. Okay. So if we go back and refresh our page, you can see John has visited the cities in the list. Then I have PH, Lome, Cape Town. So I've also passed in a list, not just a variable or a variable of a string. Now, this is another variable of a list. Basically, any variable can be passed into our template. Now, this template now is a HTML page. So if you're thinking now, you can begin to see that you could, do some analysis, get some data, maybe connect to a database using your Python now, pick up information from a database, analyze the data and display it into the template. Now let's go back. The assignment we gave. If you did the assignment well, if we go back to this file, for instance, we expected you to create a dynamic route, okay, like this, and then here, like we put here, logic for the assignment. Any person that did the assignment will now begin to see that, okay, doing the assignment, we could have done some manipulations even within this function. Okay, even though our roots are looking as simple as this, you could have series of code logic here to do something for you. Okay, in that case, now we are changing a name. If it ends in Y, you add IFUL, I think, and then if it doesn't end in Y, you add a Y to the name. That was the logic we asked us to do as an assignment. So with that logic now, you created it in your function. It's just a normal Python function, but now you return it straight. Now in this case now, today we're talking about templates. So you're now returning whatever you do, you can return it into a template. So you can have a template already designed, like we have here, that will just say welcome, whoever the user is that logged in, and then you went to your database, for instance, picked his details, so you could use it here. And maybe you have some list of cities he has visited, you can display it. So in this our web page, if we design it very well and make it very beautiful, it can begin to look like Facebook, for instance. When you log into your Facebook, you begin to see something like your name is to tell you welcome, right? They can list out the post you have made, because from their own database, it's stored in the database. They could have a logic series of codes here. We'll get to that, where you access information, bring it, analyze the information, do whatever you want to do with it, prepare the way you want to prepare, and send it to your templates. Okay. Now let's go to the next step. Now we could also use control flow like we have in the for loop. We could use it um, in our templates, using Flask. So now we begin to see kind of like the power of Flask, how it's helping us now to be able to, bring in control flow into a normal HTML page. So, okay, if we go a step further, instead of saying he has visited the cities in the list, instead of putting this way, I could decide to say he has visited the cities listed below, and then go ahead to use um, a for loop to list it. And how do I do that? In this Ginger templating, you do it like this. You put the curly bracket and put a percentage sign, and then you put another percentage sign. Then in between here, you can say for, city in cities, which is just normal way you do it in Python somehow, but just that you're having this curly bracket. But now you need to also close the for loop, which you don't do in Python, but here now you do it. So you can now say end for. In Python, once we just say for, we will not put anything in the end. We just use indentation, right, to close it. So if I use a for loop in Python, let me go back to my template. Here now I have cities. I can say for city in cities. I put colon, and then I enter here. I can just say city. Right. So in Python, you handle it this way. You don't need to say anything like end for. You just have your for loop block. But Python understands because of this indentation. Any other code I put here will fall under the for loop. That's when you're within Python. But now you are not just within Python. We've gone into our HTML template. So in our HTML, we are Flask is giving us the opportunity now to use some, like for loop from Python. So when you're doing that in Flask, you then have to end it, which we don't typically do in the normal Python. So how you end it, you also put it in this bracket with percentage. You see percentage at the opening of the bracket, percentage at the close of the bracket, and the same bracket you use to run the for loop. So now this is HTML. So I would like to use the HTML component called a list. Actually, I should actually put it within an maybe an unordered list in this case. So in the list, that's where I'll put this, all this stuff. I'll put it here. So it's within if you're familiar with HTML, but if you're not familiar with HTML too, at this point, I would say try to quickly, maybe go to w3schools.com and go to the elements of HTML quickly so that it will not look confusing. This UL here is another listing. It's a HTML tag. Most of these H1, H2, P, UL are HTML. This body, this head, So if you don't understand HTML or have no knowledge of it, it might be looking strange. So when we want to do a list, that's how we do it. But now I will put, after my for loop, I'm going to list every city in a list item like this. So I have city. So now I'm using unordered list. Unordered list, it doesn't have numbers. You will see it when we display it in the browser. So now we have a for loop here. So for each city to go through how for loop works, it goes through that list one by one. And when it goes the first time, it will pick the first city. Now, I put the first city into a list item. Of course, everything is in a list. So it will display it. Let's go to the browser. Let's save everything. Save the HTML file. Save the Flask file. Well, and then go back to our browser. Wow, where are we? Here. So in this browser, we'll refresh it. Hold on, just trying to make it a bit small here. So if I refresh it, so you see how we listed it. Okay, so there's a mistake somewhere. Instead of listing the city, is listing cities, which is not what we want. So let's go back to our code and see. So when we come here, we notice that we said for city in cities, and I said city. So I'm supposed to also use this bracket, this curly bracket for Ginger now to pick out the city, which is what I forgot. Okay, so when I save it and go back and refresh, so you can see what I'm talking about. So this list like this is what we call an unordered list. That's why it's UL element. If you change it to ordered list, you will see maybe it will have 1, 2, 3 with it but that's HTML. Now um with Flask, we're now able to have this kind of um effect of control flow in HTML. Okay, so you might be writing an application where you needed to list something, you could just achieve it something like this. Okay, now in addition to having for loop, we can also have like if statement or if condition in our template. How do we get the if condition? So let's go back to our template and say we have um let me put it this way. Okay, let's say logged in as a variable, logged in, and let me say is equal to true. Okay, so let's just assume the user is logged in, and then is when the user is logged in we can then have all this information. Okay, and so I pass it on to my template also because it's also a variable that is letting us know it's logged in. For instance, I can have it here. Always put your comma. Okay, so as another variable I'm sending to my template is logged in. Now, what I'm trying to say is if the user is logged in, then maybe we can be able to now have all of these things we have said. As from here to here. Welcome. Before it knows your name, you have to be logged in. Okay. So let's try and modify this our HTML to reflect that. So the same way we have the for, we can also have if statement with percentage, and in the middle type what we want. So I can say if logged in. So if, and then here you also have, I can have else, and then I have end if. You know, in Python, we also don't do like end if, but here now you can see we end for, and then now we also do what? We also end if. Okay. Are we together? Are you guys still
Yeah.
there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we can have it this way now. Then all of this code which we put here, we are only supposed to be able to see the user's name and the cities he has visited when he's logged in. So sorry, someone sent me a message. Let me see. Okay, yes. So we are only able to see, we should be only able to see all this information about the person when he has logged in. So let's remove it from where it is now. That's, I can cut it. Okay, and then I'll place it inside if logged in. Then you see all of that. Let me just keep it like this so it's clear. So if logged in, then we see all of that. Then else, if you're not logged in, what should we see? We should just see maybe a H1 element saying please log in. Okay, so if you're logged in, this is like an if statement now within our template, our HTML file. So if you're logged in, then all of this should happen. But if you're not logged in, what you should see is please log in. Okay, let's go back to our template and first of all say login is false. Let's say the person is not logged in and I save it. So we go to our where is it? We come here and refresh. So you see, now log in is false. What we see is please log in. The person is not yet logged in. Now let's go back and say, okay, login is true. Now I'm just putting login true, login false, but in reality, there will be a login mechanism where maybe you sign in username and password. Then when you sign in, it will go to the database and check those data you put if it's correct. If it's correct, then login will be true. That means you're logged in. So now, if so logged in equals to true, let's save it. Then go back to our web page and refresh it. So you can see, because it's logged in, the if statement is taking place on the HTML. Now that it's logged in, you can then have all those things happen. Store his name, welcome him, and then list the cities, or do things that pertain to that person because it's logged in. But if it's not logged in, it will say, please log in. So if you visit this page, if you visit our home page when you are logged in, this is what you begin to see.